Good morning. My name is Ross Bradson. I'm the Regional Director for Southwestern Ontario at OCE, and I'm the Sector Lead for Manufacturing at OCE. This morning's panel is Next Generation Manufacturing Canada, Building for the Future. The way we make things is changing at a rapid pace. The next generation of manufacturing is underway, supply chains are evolving, and sustainability is prominent in the conversation. In today's panel, we will discuss the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead in building collaboration among manufacturing and technology companies, universities, colleges, and research institutes. NGM Canada is leveraging federal government funding to build a world-leading advanced manufacturing supercluster in the province. And we have a great panel lined up to share what the supercluster is all about. To get involved in the discussion on social media, please use the hashtag OCE Discovery. Let's start off our session by introducing the moderator for today's panel. Jay Myers is the CEO of Next Generation Manufacturing Canada, an industry-led, not-for-profit corporation that builds world-class advanced manufacturing capabilities in Canada. NGM is responsible for leading the Canadian government's Advanced Manufacturing Supercluster initiative. Jay is an award-winning business economist and formerly CEO of Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters, CME. Please join me in welcoming Jason Myers.
Thanks, Ross. Well, thanks very much. It's really great to be here, and especially at an event like Discovery, where you are hit in the face, I think, or between the eyes with an awful lot of the great ideas and applications that are currently available in this region and in Canada. And that's a bit of what we're trying to do ourselves with Next Generation Manufacturing Canada and building Canada's Advanced Manufacturing Supercluster. A part of this is just raising awareness of all of the great things we do, and this event is really a very, very good example of that. So really pleased to be here with everybody else on my panel. I think you've got some bios already for the other panel participants. So I'm just going to introduce them first of all, from my immediate left to my further left. Here, and I'll let you take a look at their bios separately. But just to say, it's a group of people who I've really enjoyed working with over the past year or so as we've been putting our application for the Advanced Manufacturing Supercluster together. I think the unofficial motto for what we're trying to do is "Who knew?" And I've really enjoyed working with these four panel participants, but with all of our team and with all the great companies that have been participants in the supercluster application and now in what we're trying to achieve with NGM Canada, because I'm learning all the time. I think that's the best part of the job that I have. So on my immediate left is Melissa Chi. She's the Chief Operating Officer of Venture Lab. Melissa is also on our board of directors for Next Generation Manufacturing Canada. Dan Herman, who's the Vice President of Strategy Partnerships for Myant. Myant is one of the key investors in the supercluster, and I'm going to ask each of the panel participants to say a few words about what they're going to be doing in the supercluster itself. But Dan's also been a great advisor and a great resource to have working with our team, because he has spent the last several years working with Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada, and we couldn't have a better guy to help guide us through some of the hoops and hurdles of the contribution agreement as we're in the midst of negotiation. And so Dan has been a key part of that. Angela Papin, the Vice President of Technology at ArcelorMittal Dofasco. Again, Dofasco has been a major investor as well. I think a history of investing in manufacturing capabilities and in skills development and in research in Southern Ontario and in Hamilton in particular. But Angela too has a very interesting set of projects that Dofasco wants to undertake, and so looking forward to hearing from Angela as well. And Avi Peters, the CSO of Communitech. Avi and I have been herding cats together over the past year. It's been a challenge, but we couldn't. Let me just say this: we couldn't have gone through the process of the application and where we are right now, and setting up all of our operating procedures without Avi's sage advice in this. So I want to publicly thank you, Avi, for all of your support as well. Let me start off with just a few words of a description about what we're trying to achieve with Next Generation Manufacturing Canada and what the Advanced Manufacturing Supercluster is all about. And then I'm going to sit down. I've got some questions for the panel, and I've got my notebook here. So as they give me the answers, I can actually record that to figure out what we're actually going to be doing over the next several years. But just to say, I think as everyone knows, the federal government has provided, and we proposed $250 million for an advanced manufacturing supercluster, federal funding for this supercluster. I have to say we do not have a supercluster. Our objective is to build one. And Next Generation Manufacturing Canada is the not-for-profit, industry-led organization that is focusing on how do we ensure that Canada becomes a world leader in the application and the development and the manufacturing of advanced technologies. Our focus is on two things. First of all, accelerating the adoption of advanced technologies in manufacturing. I'll say a few words about that in a minute and why that's so important. But the second part of it is also to accelerate the scale-up of advanced technology for application and for manufacturing in Canada. And I think it's very important to look at both the technology and the manufacturing. What we're trying to do is really leverage up all of the strengths we have in this region around research, development, education, training, and technology, of course, in the private sector. We have some of the world's leading technology companies located here. We have a world-leading technology ecosystem here. How do we leverage those resources to, I was going to say kick ass in manufacturing. How do we leverage those resources to really significantly improve the competitiveness of our manufacturing sector? And how do we leverage those resources so that we're actually creating value in manufacturing by producing those technologies here in Canada? So that's our objective. Why is it important? Well, I think for a couple of reasons. And number one, as much as we have all of these great assets, and particularly in this region, we're falling behind in terms of our competitive position in manufacturing. We are falling behind in terms of the rate of investment in new technology in manufacturing. And we're not doing as well as we could be doing in terms of scaling up technology companies to actually produce and add value here in the Canadian economy. And so those are kind of the burning platform that we're trying to address in this supercluster. But we're doing that in a strategic way. First of all, we're investing in the ecosystem itself, in making things more visible, making sure that we're all aware of what the assets are in this region. One of our everybody needs a kind of a founding myth, and this is actually a true story. Some of you may know Werner Memmering, who is the head of global manufacturing at Linamar. And Werner was telling me that they're working with ClearPath Robotics in the development of their advanced manufacturing center in Guelph. And he was telling me about all of the great things that ClearPath was able to do that a lot of the large German robotics manufacturers could not do. Things like customizing AI applications to robotics and developing cobots and so forth. So it's exactly the application that Werner needs in Linamar. But then he said, you know, really the reason we're working with ClearPath is because I was standing beside their CEO at the Elmira Pancake Festival and we started talking. What we're trying to do is come up with a little bit more systematic ways of connecting technology companies and manufacturers and buying everybody tickets to the Elmira Pancake Festival, as good as that might be. If we did that with $250 million, it could be said to be a super boondoggle, but we're not going to be doing that. So a part of it is to make the resources a lot more visible, to connect, to look at opportunities to bring technology companies together with manufacturing companies, so technology companies can do a better assessment of some of the applications that would be valuable for manufacturers, and manufacturers can take a look at some of the technologies that could possibly be of use in their business. Secondly, we want to focus on building capacity among smaller manufacturing companies, smaller technology companies, to adopt technology or to scale up technology for manufacturing. I think this is also very important. Stats Canada has just released a survey a couple of years ago on business practices in manufacturing and technology companies. One of the questions they asked is, went through and looked at various methods of management practice. One of the questions they asked is, how many companies actually do any competitive benchmarking? Well, the answer is 7% of manufacturers across the country. So 93% of manufacturers are basically operating in the dark in this country, and 2% of small technology companies. So 98% of our small tech companies are operating in the dark. We can do a better job than that, and in fact we have to do a better job than that if we're going to successfully both implement technology and manage technology and develop and manufacture technology. We have to know what is of value to customers, we have to know what the competition is doing, and we have to be able to apply and scale up technology in time frames and on a competitive basis that makes sense for global competition. One of the other questions that they asked is, for companies that are investing in technology, are you successful in meeting your business objectives? And business objectives could be product development, process improvement, cost reduction, and so forth. Well, between 35 and 45% of companies say that we've made investments in advanced technologies, but we were not successful in meeting our business objectives. That tells me the objective was too ambitious, the technology was a wrong choice, or they were simply unable to manage the implementation and the use of technology optimally. In any case, it's a management issue, a management challenge. And that's why we're focusing a great deal of our activity and significant investment in capacity building activities, funding programs, events, to really focus on the methodologies that stand behind the adoption and the scale-up of advanced technologies. Provide some funding, for instance, or some small amount of funding for things like technology audits, process audits, technology assessments, feasibility studies, helping to connect companies to the scale-up centers, the tools, the test beds that will help them de-risk technology, to pilot technology adoption, and above all, to focus on two things: on leadership, management, and skills, business skills around the management of technology, number one, but going back to basics and going back to the principles of lean industry, which is focusing on customer value and looking at removing the non-value adding activities that do not contribute to customer value. It's a pretty good business principle, but it's where technology decisions need to begin. So those are some of the objectives behind the activities, the services, some of the funding, the programs that we're going to be offering through our supercluster. The idea is not to replicate or duplicate the wheel. The idea is to invest in organizations, in networks that are already doing this, but to tie them together, to build collaboration, to build a lot more coordination across what is going on, and really to connect technology companies and manufacturing companies much more effectively. A very significant part of our activities too is going to be funding projects. And the projects, in a way, create not only demand for collaborative engagement on the part of technology companies, manufacturers, research institutions, universities, colleges, etc., but also I think are beacons in terms of the types of challenges that that companies are facing today. We have over $800 million of industry investment, industry commitment to put into projects, and I think if we add on top of that a number of the other investments that are also available that we've identified from other superclusters, close to $2 billion of commitments to specific types of projects on behalf of industry. Well, what a great way to be able to align some of our research activities, some of our training and education activities to serve the objectives of, and the, you know, the grand challenges, I guess, of those types of technology projects. And that's where I think NGM Canada can play a big role in not only funding the projects, but building collaboration around that. We're going to be looking at 3 types of projects, and we will have a description up here of some of the specifics around some of the projects that are being proposed. But just to summarize, the first set of projects are going to be technology development projects that will give Canadian companies a real global advantage in terms of their ability to develop the technology and the ability to implement that technology within their own company. Second type of project we're calling technology adoption projects, where we have companies that are looking at the adoption, the widespread adoption of various advanced technologies, and those types of projects will enable us to build collaboration across the supply chain, build a lot of suppliers into those projects. The third type are technology diffusion projects, where we have a unique, potentially world-leading technology that has been developed here in Canada, and where we're looking at more manufacturers, more companies to be able to adopt those technologies and to manufacture those products here in Canada. Those are the 3 types of projects that we're going to be undertaking. So I know that everybody is chomping at the bit to wondering how you can be engaged in what we're doing. I can tell you I never knew I had as many best friends before. After we got the signal that we got the go-ahead on our supercluster project, I've got a lot of great friends there who apparently need money immediately, and that's not the way this will work. How it will work, though, is opportunities for technology companies, manufacturing companies, universities, colleges, research institutes to become involved and engaged in our projects as project partners, to invest in some of the grand challenges and build collaborative projects around the projects that we have in our supercluster group, and also, of course, as beneficiaries of some of the capacity building activities, the meetings, the coordination that we'll be undertaking as part of our job at NGM Canada. Those are the key ways of being involved. I can't get into too much detail right now because we're literally in the midst of negotiating our agreement with the federal government. But stay tuned. I hope that all of you are on our database and our email list. We'll be sending out regular updates in terms of our status there. But I think maybe the best thing I could do right now, just to give everybody kind of a flavor of where people are coming from within the supercluster, the types of projects, and so forth, is to have a seat and let everybody else do the talking here. And I'm going to start off maybe working with Melissa, Dan, Angela, and Avi in that kind of direction. Maybe you can give a very quick description of why you're interested, first of all, in what we're doing in the supercluster, and some of the specific things that you're looking for in terms of activities that you can play and projects that you'd undertake within the supercluster. So, Melissa, why don't I start with you?
Sure. Thanks, Jay. So I think the reason why we got involved is really around a framework around talent, capital, technology, and customers. As a regional innovation center for York Region and actually Barrie and North Simcoe and Muskoka, we serve 1.8 million Ontarians. And so the opportunity is to really leverage the technology prowess that from an enterprise level that exists in that region as it plays to a larger Ontario narrative and Canadian narrative, and intersect big corporate in York Region. Particularly in Markham, we have 400 of the global headquarters of global multinationals. These are the IBMs, the AMDs, the Qualcomms, the Celesticas of the world, intersecting and working side by side by a number of enterprise level startups, right? So the startups that we see typically are going to be looking at enterprise grade type of technologies in a variety of different sectors, but particularly around ICT and health technologies and advanced manufacturing. So what we're looking for, that was really the kind of desire and the interest from a number of stakeholders. We worked with kind of 50 partners across the sector, very technology deep, particularly around semiconductor and microelectronics, but beyond. And our academic partners like York University, Seneca, they're looking for a way to leverage this kind of regional asset that we have to really catapult and work across with our other partners across the region and frankly across Canada. I think this is a Canadian mandate, and it's really about how do we create and leverage all these regional assets to make us more globally competitive.
Great, thanks, Melissa. Dan, tell us a little bit about Myant.
For sure. So Myant, and I'll start with a brief introduction. We're relatively not so well known, but Myant is developing the world's first textile computing platform. And what that means is that we embed at the nanoscale within a fiber biometric sensors and a variety of actuators, heat, cooling, and electricity within textiles. And that could be anything from a bed sheet to a piece of clothing to a car seat. So the opportunities for us to partner with players across industries is immense. And so the supercluster is and I'm biased because of my previous role, I always have to say that. But nonetheless, the supercluster is an amazing opportunity to build around us what we need to grow. Because we're in a very new space, and to build the capacity in this ecosystem around talent and around capital is integral. That won't happen overnight, but that is over the next couple of years. If we can build a rich ecosystem of talent, and for us, because we're a hybrid, we're not just a technology company and we're not a manufacturing company. We're literally the intersection of both, where we work at the advanced material stage, advanced manufacturing with some of the most modern robotic machinery in the world. And to glue that together, we need the best engineers in the world, we need the best mechanical engineers in the world, we need the best technicians in the world. And to get that, we've got an ecosystem of post-secondary institutions, of other research partners, and of supply chain partners who can help us build that. But the supercluster is the glue to bring it together.
Great, thanks. I think the Myant project is probably one of the most ambitious projects that I've seen. The ultimate objective is to rebuild a textile industry here in Canada, and it's a really excellent example, I think, of how innovation can take an industry that is seen to be an old traditional industry and catapult it into the 21st century, but a really good example of some of the economic impact that we can see from that as well. So, Angela, a different type of project from Dofasco.
Yeah, so I'm with ArcelorMittal Dofasco. So if you don't know, ArcelorMittal is the world's largest mining and steel company. And so we have a site right here in Hamilton. So we are the largest Canadian producer of flat rolled products. And really what we saw at the supercluster was about the adoption of technology. We, as a very large organization, we have 230,000 employees, we have 1,400 researchers worldwide. So we do a tremendous amount of research. But what we saw was we needed to continue to work with the local areas and really figure out how do we adopt the technology. We have so much great research happening at CanMet, at MAC, at U of T, all the universities around us, the national labs. We have these pockets of huge investments happening. but are we really taking the advantage and taking that technology and embedding it to help manufacturing and accelerate, improve the productivity of Canadian manufacturers so we can become more competitive? And it wasn't just about the steel industry. We said this is really an ecosystem. It's about making our suppliers better so that they can adopt the technologies, and our customers. And when we look at them, these are those SMEs. How do they know? They might be 20 people in a company. They don't know who to go and who's doing research in a robotic that could help them. So this is the idea that we saw as a supercluster brings that portal, that triage, where somebody can go with a problem and say, I don't know who's working on this, but can you help me find them? And that's where we really saw the advantage.
Great. Thanks, Angela. Avi, from your view in Communitex, where do you see the biggest advantage in terms of participation in the supercluster?
So for us at Communitech and in Waterloo Region generally, we're big believers in clusters as a way to drive good economic activity, not just for community, but for broader regions. And so, we work with 1,400 technology firms, but we're absolutely aware of the fact that technology is not an industry unto itself. It's an enabler of good things in other industries. And so for us, the big opportunity that presented itself with the supercluster was really to take the economic density of Canada's manufacturing sector and the economic density of the technology sector that live right here in Southern Ontario and overlay those two. So really, that's the exciting opportunity for us. As far as Communitech is concerned, where we think we can add the most value going forward is really around helping to generate those ecosystem connections. That's the business we're in, is in connecting companies large and small, companies with academic partners, to build partnerships and collaborative opportunities that organizations might not otherwise find on their own. And so I think that's where we'll be able to really help move this forward.
So this question may be kind of a bit of a repetition of that, and I'm going to start with Avi and come this way, but looking at the supercluster, but also based on your wealth of experience in industry and with technology, with manufacturing, what are the sort of some of the biggest gaps or the biggest challenges that you see in terms of building this ecosystem, of trying to bring manufacturing and technology together in a much more kind of systematic way?
I think you alluded to some of them in your opening comments, Jay. I think one of the first challenges to overcome is to take people that are doing good work in what we think of as adjacent industries and mash them together. They don't know how to make the connections that Angela alluded to. They don't know how to find the right research partner, the right channel partner, the right organization to build another collaboration with. And so part of what we need to do is create that intersection or opportunities for intersection amongst companies and organizations. The other thing that I know we have a challenge with, and it is, we've got so many SMEs in our both in the tech space and the manufacturing space that struggle to scale. They struggle to find the right kind of talent at the right time, access to the right kind of capital at the right time. They struggle to break into new international markets as quickly as we would hope that they would. And so those are the kinds of things that I think the supercluster set of activities gives us an opportunity to really move forward.
Right. Angela, again, you and Dofasco has been very active in trying to build the supply chain and improve capabilities. What do you see as some of the challenges there?
Yeah, I think just finding the right partners, and our project that we've proposed for this was to completely automate our ladle metallurgy facility. So basically taking, it's become a personless ladle metallurgy, and if you don't know what that is, this will be the first in the world to do this. And what we do is we take a 300-ton vat of steel, and we have to fine-tune it with alloys in the kilogram type range. And so this is done very manually today. Some's added, people have to get very close to it. We have to then rake the slag off of it. We're doing these manual things. And so as we look at this and we're saying, how do we completely take the person away from actually physically having to do that and improve the quality of that steel? We starting to lay these out, but we're saying we don't know what's the robot that can actually work at those kinds of temperatures and can perform that kind of task. And are there actually smart cameras and sensors out there where right now a person looks at it and just through 30 years of experience will say, now's the right time to add the next alloy addition or to stop stirring. How will I teach a sensor or a camera to do that? And does it exist today? So trying to find those things is our challenge.
Right. And Dan, in terms of your interest in building the talent supply chain and the customer supply chain in terms of companies that can use the technology, what do you see as some of the challenges?
Well, Myant is a bit of the flip side of what the two of you have discussed, that we're a 50-person company in North Toronto. We have an 80,000 square foot facility. But with 50 people, we're relatively new. We've got some limits as to what we can invest and where we allocate our dollar. And we've got to make sure those dollars are allocated exceptionally judiciously. So the supercluster is really a means of taking some projects we're doing today. And so, example in the healthcare space, where as a province, we spend about 40 cents of every dollar on healthcare. Our ability to cut that cost through remote monitoring, the connected home, the future of connected health is an exceptional opportunity. We've been working closely with Toronto Rehab, with University of Toronto, and with Holland Bloorview Kids Rehabilitation Hospital on a variety of projects. We can blow those up immediately and capture what is a pretty finite window that we have some competitive advantage in. And if we don't capture that window, we'll keep talking about Canadian companies being great at technology, but not at being world leaders.
Right.
And really, this is a means of turning a bunch of companies into world leaders.
Great, thanks. Melissa, what do you see as some of the challenges?
Similar to what Avi said, for Venture Lab in our own region, we see a huge talent gap, right? And so, prior to joining Venture Lab, I built a semiconductor company inside of Markham, right? Took it from Series A and took it public. And the major gap is around talent and how you scale, exactly what Avi was saying, right? We built this company from the ground up, leveraged Canadian engineers and technical talent to now, I've heard, see that all disappear into Palo Alto. And that is not what we want, right? What we want is to see a resurgence of very, very smart technical engineering talent with the intersection of the entrepreneurial talent that we've been growing across the ecosystem in order to see more of those types of companies like a Myant to help them grow and scale inside of Canada. The other piece I think that I want to mention from our vantage point in terms of the global multinationals that we see, that is also a talent gap. So where you see, I'll use an IBM in our own jurisdiction, who employs 10,000 employees inside a York region, we want to see an Intel and a Qualcomm and an AMD and a Huawei and all of these global multinationals as an FDI strategy into Canada to invest more of their dollars, not just on research, but building and growing and scaling world-leading products such that seeds the startup ecosystem. So things that people may or may not know, right? The headset that AMD is making their resurgence on the global stage, made in Markham, designed and engineered in Markham. The Intel 5G chipsets that Encore is using here, collaboration with Ericsson, made in Toronto, right? These are the things we as Canadians need to be proud of because these are Canadian assets and IP, and we can feed a talent ecosystem that sees this SME community grow and scale for big and small.
I can't tell you the number of new device companies that have told me they end at design for manufacturing, and then they look for someone in Taiwan to manufacture. So as we're looking at scaling up technologies for either application or for production here in Canada, or on the other hand, as we're looking at the ability of manufacturing companies actually to be able to adopt technology, what do you see at that kind of latter stage kind of technology readiness, manufacturing readiness. It seems to me that that's where, not only in a financing sense, but there is a real gap there, gap in communication, gap in awareness, as well as maybe a bit of a management challenge as well. But Melissa, do you want to, especially around the your experience with IT and with microelectronics, do you see that as a challenge to get?
Yeah.
How do we scale up?
Yeah,
I
think the challenge, historically anyway, I'll say Canadians tend to invest a lot in front-end R&D, like pure research, and we've all heard this story before, right? Where we stumble and then have to rely on a global partner is when we're trying to get from, we're really good at the prototyping stage, like the first 10, the first 15, maybe even the first 1,000. We have the facilities, I think, in Canada to do that. I think the opportunity is making sure we all know where those prototyping and those types of facilities as an asset map for Canada or starting with Ontario exists. But the real opportunity is really focusing on the areas from a manufacturing and design for manufacturing scalability perspective in terms of front-end engineering, where you take and have those facilities that you can really do a first run. So in my own personal case, I did have to do the Taiwan thing, right? So I was dealing with the big behemoth of the semiconductor industry, which is TSMC. I would much rather have had an ability to fab my chips here in Canada at a scale from 1,000 to maybe 500,000 chips, right? Because that will just let me turn and prototype and test faster. Once you're already at full volume, and in our case, we ramped to kind of 50 million, 60 million chips, of course you have to go to the volume play, which is offshore, but where Canada has an opportunity to leverage the engineering prowess with the manufacturing capability is actually in that first, and I'll let my colleagues speak better to this, but the 1 million, up to a 1 million piece mark. Now you've got the entire prototype and process kind of here in Canada. You can share it with an offshore partner and a global partner who has much bigger capabilities than we will ever have here to basically own that process and share it with the experts.
Great, super. Dan?
I think Melissa's, to a degree, explained part of our strategy at Myant, that our capacity, our footprint is meant and designed to do exactly that, to not just be able to create a prototype and to work with a client or a partner on that prototype, but to actually produce relatively en masse. And you look at the cost competitiveness issues that are rising around the world, the rising costs of energy, labor rates around the world, we can now make a clean engineered product here in Etobicoke at 100 Ronson at an exceptionally competitive value. The job creation capability of that is quite immense, in part because we have these two sides. We employ engineers who come from a whole bunch of universities and colleges, but we also employ technical staff and production staff in order to glue it together.
So, Angela, your Dofasco's kind of scaled up already.
Kind of.
Yeah. But how do you, so maybe looking at the other way, for in the steel industry where the product, the process is already commoditized, or you could argue that it is commoditized, it is going to be the high value product and the high value process that really stands out. But maybe could you say a few things about your vision of what the digitization of ladle steel production, what that's going to lead to, and maybe some of the challenges you see in doing that?
Yeah, I think the whole digital world is something that we're embarking in and seeing the opportunities that's giving to us, and we're really excited to look at, from an artificial intelligence standpoint, really not just saying what are we doing at this point of the manufacturing, but actually learning that the system actually learns what's coming to it. It can make modifications as it's learning, and then it knows what's going to happen after and what the processes following it are and what our customers are going to do with it. And we may have to be able to fine tune it right at the ladle metallurgy. So taking in that whole AI methodology, talking about digital twins, right? So why do I have to actually physically, because it costs me a lot of money if I try to do a prototype on 300 tons of steel, but creating digital twins so that we can run simulations that used to take weeks and weeks, We can do it now within seconds. And if I can do that, the steels I can develop and understand the impact upstream and downstream and what my suppliers are giving me and what my customer is going to do, we think that's really the breakthrough for us.
Great, thanks. Abby, what do you see in terms of some of the challenges around the scale-up activities of your clients?
I think, actually, just to pick up on what my colleagues have said, I think this is why one of the central pieces to the supercluster strategy that we've laid out is to understand what are, first of all, the expertise that is already here, sitting in companies that might be something we can unlock for the benefit of small firms who are trying this stuff for the first time, or don't realize that on their doorstep there are facilities and supports and services where they can do that early piece of activity. And I think it really comes back to us engineering those connections to make sure that that all firms can tap into what's sitting here already, and for us to then also strategically build out capacity in certain parts of the ecosystem where we think there's the last mile to go.
That's good. I'm going to ask everybody to think about 5 years down the road, and the supercluster funding is available for 5 years. NGM Canada's vision is well beyond 5 years, however. Here, I think a lot of what we're looking at is a long-term play and long-term value that we can provide to the Canadian economy. So I'm going to ask everybody, but to think 5 years down the road and think about what your definition of success would be for the supercluster. But I want to say, one of the things before asking that. One of the things that I've been impressed about already, even before the money flows, although that has certainly helped align a lot of interest, is the degree of collaboration, the degree of awareness that has already been built up through our activities. I've always said that Canadians are all unique. All our businesses are unique, all our sectors are unique, the provinces are unique, every city is unique, and then when you get down to it, every Canadian is unique, but we're all unique in extremely similar ways. All of the issues around technology, when we looked out across manufacturing sectors, we have materials, sensors, microelectronics companies, we've got food, we've got steel, we've got high-value wood producers, we have auto parts producers and assembly companies, all health and medical device companies, IoT companies, all in our supercluster, all as part of our what we're trying to build in this network. But everybody has fairly similar interests around the types of technology, digital technologies, the application, not only in information communications, data analysis, but also in additive, around smart materials, around opportunities to develop AI applications, what that means for cybersecurity and so forth. They're all fairly common issues and interests, and I think what we've already seen are a lot of companies that are beginning to recognize that they do have common interests, and particularly when it comes to some of the real foundational challenges that companies face as they try to apply these technologies. Materials characterization, for instance, in additive manufacturing, cybersecurity and digital, the use of data to develop new lines of business in digital. These are all challenges that face that are there across the industry, and I think they're also challenges that we can build on as we look at collaboration. It's not just collaboration around these projects, but it's our ability to identify what some of these grander challenges are in technology and to bring real expertise that we have here in Canada to bear, both on the corporate side as well as the university and research and talent development side as well. But if that's the objective, and I think there's some really good opportunities, I think we've already made a lot of headway in bringing companies together and focusing on common issues. I think we made a lot of headway just in our ability to put an application together that was successful with ISAD. But as you guys look out in 5 years, how would you define success? How would you define our what has been effective and what has really, changed the game for the Canadian economy generally, for Canadians, but also technology manufacturing. So maybe start with Abby and work backwards.
I think, success for me will look like something that's very un-Canadian. I think the supercluster gives us the opportunity to make some big bets and to take some risks and to do things that, perhaps we, in our more cautious business environments, wouldn't necessarily do. Dan is talking about Myant essentially transforming the textile industry, and he and his team don't mean to do that just for Canada. I think a home run would be having that smart textile solution rolled out in hospitals around the world. That's what success looks like. If we can get a couple of those really big wins because we were willing to make some big bets, then we'll have done a good job.
Thanks. Angela?
So it's similar to that. I think we have to be bold, and I think we have to say that we want to see a 50% improvement in productivity across all Canadian manufacturing, and be bold and say that we will penetrate the global markets with our manufactured products from Canada, and set very, very tangible targets, and be bold and be the non-Canadian, as we always are, sitting back, but that people are recognizing that I'm going to go to Canada and I want to invest there for my manufacturing site because of the technology that's available there that I can leverage, and that to me is success.
Great, thanks. Dan?
This is supercluster, right? And the super in front means something because there's lots of small cluster activities, there's lots of existing pools of fundings and partnership. But really, for this to have a sustainable impact, it is about creating some global champions. Can we do that in 5 years? We'll see. We'll see how far we go along that road to creating companies that can succeed at the global level and that are, to the Intel example, that, Intel's a $245 billion market cap company that we all know as the little Intel Inside sticker on your computer. But it's like, why can't we build, for us, it's powered by Myant in the same type of realm.
Right. That's it. Melissa?
Yeah, I think, as my colleague said, I think the real bold challenge here is figuring out what we aren't going to do. And so where investment will follow, where we'll spend dollars on things that are hot topics and not actually put the energy into very difficult technical challenges and investments, and I will say hardware and a software integration, that's where it's transformative, right, in terms of the technology sense. So if you're looking for a transformative technology, you're going to have to make the hardware investments in order to run the software pieces on top. And the challenge with hardware, as we all know as technologists, is it's a long game. It's not a 5-year game. It's a 10 to 15, 20-year game, but the net return for Canadians is increase in GDP. Those are facts that an economist would stand behind, right? It's just a longer game. I think for us, as my colleagues have said, I would love to see another ATI Technologies built here and not get acquired by AMD at $6 billion of market cap. I want to see more of those homegrown success stories that that one started out at U of T and grew to a $6 billion exit, but I'd rather have them just not exit. I'd rather them just be a Canadian company. And to my colleagues from that perspective, right?
Great, thanks. Well, some pretty big objectives. I had some pretty big
pressure.
challenges.
No pressure.
No pressure. But and we've been speaking about this at a fairly general level, but maybe an opportunity to go to the floor and see if there were any specific questions you might have about particularly about how you can engage with the supercluster, but we'll leave it up to. Yeah. Sorry, I'll let you go first, and then ask you to take the mic.
Thank you for the informative discussion. And I'm from IRAP, downtown Toronto, and some of the I would like to share with you some of the observations that going forward may shape up the supercluster strategy. One is that for technology-wise, I also worked in the Silicon Valley. Nothing beats Canadian engineers. In fact, some of the Silicon Valley companies talk about Canadian engineers as one of the best in the world. And they actually come here and set up shops here. Case in point, like companies like Synopsys. Most of the silicon designs and I/O designs happen here in Toronto with Canadian engineers. So we got the technology talent. When I see some of the companies that we make investments in from IRAP and try and help the companies, I think the biggest thing that we also need is the business sense in sharpening our business skills, finding the opportunities, and also the other thing is that we got a big giant at the south of the border, although they do make noises, but they are our very good partners and very good friends, and we should be able to kind of forge better relationships where we are supplying technology to some of those people and equally benefiting. I think the collaboration with the United States would be a great asset to us, and also mimicking that model with the European Union and further out. I think that's where we need to be. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Those are really good points, I think. What I'd like to do is see if maybe we can take some comments, questions, and then I'll just ask the panel to respond to everything that we've heard. So here and then at the back. Sorry. Hi.
So everyone, thanks first of all for a really engaging discussion. Each of you in your turn at some point mentioned access to talent. So in some ways, regardless of the industry, talent is one of the raw materials that all successful businesses need to grow. And we know that it's a decision if we're talking about FDI and companies coming to take root in Canada and invest here. One of the things on their minds is their ability to access the talent that they need. So in light of that, what are the thoughts from the Supercluster and from each of you, the role that funding and that organization and that network can play in talent and development of talent in Canada?
Great. Okay, no, that's a really good question, and pretty important in terms of what we're trying to achieve as well. So maybe one more question at the back, if I could, and then I'll ask the panel to sum up.
Stuart Kramer, R&D Chair for the Ontario Aerospace Council. Superclusters are defined by the commons as much as anything. When people talk about Silicon Valley, they're not talking about one company, they're talking about a concept. It's understood that Silicon Valley means innovation. How does Ontario create that understanding and that brand for Ontario? What are the commons? What do we have to share? When you have manufacturers who are coming from diverse industries, we all draw from the same ecosystem. How does the Supercluster grow the ecosystem? What can we do together that's not proprietary, but makes all of Ontario stronger and brings growth to all of us?
Okay, so those are good comments and questions. So what I've taken away is how do we build business capabilities to actually apply and to scale up in a much more accelerated way. What do you see the importance of international connections to be? What is our objective, and how do we ensure that we're building talent? And how does building collaboration create a brand so that people want to come to Ontario and Canada, but also see this region as a really as dynamic, or even more dynamic than Silicon Valley? I mean, we've got the opportunity that we have because of the diversity of our manufacturing base and because of the strength of our technology and research base is really unique in the world in many senses. And so how do we leverage that into something that is not just a group of projects, I'd say. So not that you have to respond to each one of those, but just maybe final thoughts from the panel. Melissa?
Sure. I think Canada's biggest strength is its communities, right? And I'm not going to say this from a politically standpoint. It's diverse, and that is our differentiating strength on the global stage. And so when it comes to talent and capacity building, the talent narrative starts from little kids right? And so when you're talking about engineering and business talent, you're talking about I have 3 young kids. So at very young ages, my son, the middle, the 6-year-old, how do you make sure that you're exposing them to a broad variety of social sciences? It's not just about STEM, and I am an engineer, right? So I'm a proud engineer, but it's not just about STEM. It's about social sciences, arts, engineering, science, the intersection of all 4 of those with an entrepreneurial layer. How do you start fostering that culture at a very early age? And then what institutions, when you go further down the pipeline from K to post-secondary, in the university and post-college standpoint, how do you actually create programming that actually fosters that further down the line? It's around that.
Great, thanks. Dan?
There's not much I can add to that because it's a great answer. And really, like when you go back to the 5-year success marker, that's about building a long-term pipeline of talent that's going to go in a variety of industries. It's not about advanced manufacturing. It's about technology underpinning all industries. But to enable that, we need, from K to 12 forward, a system that builds itself into STEAM, right? And it's taken what we've traditionally conceptualized as STEM and making sure that we've got, as to the first gentleman's comments, an understanding of how to sell internationally and how to build big companies. Once you package that together, the third commenter's question about the valley versus here, you look at all the per capita statistics, like we're there, right? The fact that every company, every big company, every multinational wants to come to the KW, Toronto, Hamilton corridor, triangle, whatever we're going to call it, is because of what's here. I, as a biased private sector employer, would rather they not look too hard at the talent here because there's only so much of it. And until we create that pipeline, it is a challenge. But it speaks to the vibrancy of what we do have here. And I think if we were a bit louder and a bit brasher about how great the ecosystem is, then we'd be on the cover of every third economics and innovation policy book just as quickly.
Thanks. Angela?
So I think it's really a big part of creating the talent and that momentum. The onus is on industry and on manufacturing. We need to create those opportunities. It's up to us to open up positions, to work with the government, to work with universities, to allow people to do their PhDs and work in industry at the same time. And make it exciting. There is fantastic things happening in manufacturing. There's fantastic things. The steel industry isn't what it was 20 years ago. Technology is there, and some people, we're not showing that. We're not talking about it. And I think it's up to the manufacturing and industry to really take the talent and give them those opportunities, give them those co-ops, give them those internships to work with us and really show them how they can incorporate their innovation, their entrepreneurial style in a very multinational company. And I think that's the success that we'll have.
All right, thanks. Abby?
Talent, 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 right? I really think that is the fundamental advantage we have in doing this. And to pick up on the comment from the gentleman from IRAP, it isn't just about the technical talent. It's about making sure that we're building the business capability. We are building talent that can not only grow companies, but scale companies, scale them internationally, and to build the $6 billion firm that isn't going to leave. It's that business talent as much as anything else.
Okay, well, thanks very much. I think everybody has sort of echoed a point that has really resonated for me for a long time, that when we talk about technology superclusters, what we're really talking about is people. And our ability to connect, our ability to work together, our ability to add value, our ability to build up that talent pool, but in a way that people are proud to be able to work in a pretty exciting sector. And I think that's where we all have a common. We're all unique, and we all have a common aim to do that. And talking about people, we're as I say, just to kind of summarize where we are right now, we're going through a fairly rigorous negotiation with ISED about the terms and conditions that we'll be receiving funding. But at the same time, we're looking ahead at building where that vision is going to take us and how we have to get there. So I really do count. We have a room full of very highly talented people in this room. We're going to be calling on you to help us, and not maybe the other way around. Here, we'll be reaching out to, and we'll be keeping everybody up to speed in terms of what we're doing. But I think as we develop this and as we roll out our ideas about where we can fill in the gaps and what we need to do and how we can support activities that are already going on here and build them into even more coordinated strategies and approaches, we're going to be counting on all of you to provide us that your wisdom and your insights about how to do that best. So we're going to be looking at very much forward to working together and with OCE and with many of the other organizations in this room as well. So thanks very much. Thanks, Ross.
So thank you very much to our panelists, Melissa, Dan, Angela, and Avi. This panel certainly touches on what's next in advanced manufacturing. We really appreciate everyone taking the time to be with us. Thank you also to our moderator, Jay. And as a token of our thanks, we'd like you to accept this small gesture of our appreciation. Jillian has some bags for you. And we'll adjourn this session. Thank you all for attending, and enjoy the rest of Discovery.